Hello and welcome again to the programme where you can help police solve serious crimes from all over the country. We're live as usual with 40 phone lines standing by, and the detectives investigating tonight's cases are here waiting for your call. The number, as always, is 01 811 8055.
We hope this next 40 minutes is going to be as effective as the programme last month. We'll give you news about that later. Tonight, the sad story of Cathy Walsh, a grandmother from Tooting in South London, who was killed for no apparent motive. We've video of a shoplifter who, with a trolley full of booty, simply barged her way out of a Sainsbury's store. And we've reconstructed an astonishing city centre hold-up in Oxford, in which armed raiders held up a security van and even a police car. But first, we've news of a major development in a key case that we featured in December. Linda Hunter from Carnoustie near Dundee disappeared in August. Her car was found in Manchester the following day, though several items were missing, including one of the wheels. Last Thursday, Linda's body was discovered in Ladybank Woods. That's about 30 miles south of Carnoustie, close to the main A914 Dundee to Kirkcuddy Road, a couple of miles from her parents' home in Glenrothes. So sadly, as police feared it would, this missing person case has now become a murder investigation. And there's been a further development, one which maybe you can help with. Someone saw a wheel with a Michelin tire, very much like the one missing from Linda's car. It was lying by the side of that main road, the A914. But 6 hours after the witness saw it, it was gone. Now, there's no crime in that. If you recovered that wheel, or if you spotted it there, or if you saw Linda in the area on Friday, August the 21st, please call us right now, or call Fife Police on 0592, that's the code for Glenrothes, 52611.
Our first case tonight is the murder of Cathy Walsh. Cathy was 60 years old, a rather sad woman in some ways, and yet no one has yet provided any clue or reason as to why she should have been murdered. In 1986, she'd been thrilled to become a grandmother when her daughter Pat gave birth to little Amy. The child became Cathy's pride and joy, and there were few other joys in her life. She'd been quite ill in the past few months. She had severe arthritis, and only 3 weeks before she died, she'd been in hospital with a heart condition. Our reconstruction begins on the day before she died, October the 20th, in Tooting in South London. Cathy had lived in this street for over 30 years. Life wasn't easy for her. For 2 months, her gas supply had been cut off, and she was always short of money. She was well known in the area, as she had a habit of asking favours of some of the local shopkeepers and this garage a few yards away from her home.
Here she comes again, Vic. I bet she wants to use the phone.
Honey, all right if I use the phone again?
Yes.
Today, shares take another tumble all over the world. In the wake of last week's hurricane, the cowboys start moving.
Cathy's daughter, Pat, lived a few miles away in South Croydon.
Over who speaks what. Once again this morning, shares have nosedived on the London stock market. The 100-share index was down more than 300...
Hello? Hello, Pat, love?
Hello, Mum. Why haven't you phoned? Haven't you been well?
She usually phoned her daughter every day.
Look, why don't you come over tomorrow for a nice bath while your gas is off?
Well, I suppose it would do my back good.
Well, ring me before you come, and I'll make sure I don't go out.
All right, dear. See you in the morning.
Bye, then.
Pat was very close to her mother, but there were still some things she didn't know about her. Opposite Tooting Station on Mitcham Road is the Railway Bell pub. Cathy used to come here regularly, usually on her own. But staff at the Railway Bell say she met a young man there several times until about 2 weeks before her death. And another woman who knew Cathy believes she may have seen them together one more time.
See you on Tuesday night. Bye.
Mrs. Robichaud overheard Cathy arranging to meet him the next day. No one knows who this young man is, and police are anxious to trace him. The next day, Cathy had been in a lot of pain and had spent much of Tuesday in bed.
I'm back.
She'd sent her lodger, Rudy, out for some shopping.
Here's your vodka and cigarettes. Don't forget to put the latch down tonight.
No, I won't.
Rudy works night shifts and was out all that night.
See you in the morning.
82, 82. 71, 71.
But despite her illness, she was seen later that evening at the Granada Bingo on Mitcham Road. She went several times a week and would usually sit by herself. Later, Cathy was seen sitting opposite a woman. Although they didn't appear to be together, police still need to trace her.
2 and 6, 26.
How are you tonight, Cathy?
Not too bad. See you later.
See you later.
A friend of Cathy's remembers she seemed unhappy that night. Later, she was seen in the foyer, and she seemed to be waiting. About 10 minutes later, two women saw someone who looked like Cathy boarding the number 44 bus.
I haven't any money.
Cathy was in the habit of not paying her fare. She seemed flustered and upset. They remember her getting out her pension books.
Would you give this to the bus driver? It's my address. All right.
She got off the bus on the corner of Gorringe Park Avenue near her home. And that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Mrs. Johnson lives several doors away from Cathy's house. Much later that night, she'd been finding it difficult to sleep. The screams went on for several minutes. They seemed to come from the direction of Cathy's house. Just around the corner from Cathy's house, the milkman remembers seeing a brown Datsun parked across the pavement. There was someone in the passenger seat. At about the same time, a paperboy who passed Cathy's house remembers seeing the curtains open and her bedroom light on, but there was nobody in the room. Later that morning, when her body was found, the curtains were drawn and the light was off. Cathy had been strangled and left in her bed. Well, Mr. Gibb-Gray, do you think she knew whoever it was who killed her?
Yes, I think it's very likely that she did know who killed her. When we got to the house, there was no sign that anyone had entered forcibly. No windows had been broken, and the door, in fact, was intact.
And there seemed to be no motive at all.
It's a brutal and motiveless murder.
She didn't have any money, so...
She didn't have any money, no, that's right, and we can't think of any reason why anyone should want to kill her. She was a harmless old lady.
How certain are you that it was Cathy on the 44 bus that night?
Well, we have two people who say they saw her, and they're fairly certain that they saw her. What we'd like to do is hear from the bus driver who drove that number 42 on that particular evening. We'd also like to hear of anyone else who's on that bus who may well have seen Cathy. And the questions I would ask there is, was she alone? And when she got off the bus, did she turn left or right? Did she go home, or did she go back towards Tooting and maybe to a public house and meet somebody there?
Right. Just to assure the bus driver, who must have received that envelope, but that he'll come forward in confidence, won't
Yes, he may well have committed some minor disciplinary offence against the London Transport Board, but what we're investigating here is a very serious case of murder.
It's odd that Cathy didn't pay her fare, because in fact she had a bus pass anyway, didn't she?
That's strange, and we really can't account for that, and that may well account for her rather odd behaviour on the bus. Or, of course, she may well have been anticipating meeting someone later that evening and may have been slightly worried or concerned about it.
Now, the bus pass went missing. The other thing that went missing was one of her pension books. This, in fact, is not a pension book, it's a mobility allowance book. And this is a replica of what has gone missing. Do you think whoever killed her is the one who stole it?
It's possible. We don't know that it's been stolen. It hasn't been cashed since that time. It's worth about £88 a month. This one has a unique feature on it. It's Aken, A-K-E-N, corner, rather than Amen corner, that part of Tooting where Kathy would have cashed it.
So that makes it quite distinctive.
So we'd like to hear from anyone who's seen it since that time.
Right. Now, that young man, maybe she was going to meet him later that evening and maybe that's why she was flustered. You want him to come forward?
Yes, we'd like him to come forward. Again, he's got something important to tell us. He saw her on that Monday afternoon, and firm arrangements appear to have been made for him to meet her on the Tuesday. We'd like him to come forward so we can eliminate him from the investigation.
And perhaps anybody who's been drinking at the Railway Bell in the past might recognise him too.
That's right.
The other important thing is the photograph. The one thing you couldn't trace or identify in her flat was who the person is in this particular photograph.
Yes, that's very interesting because all her friends and indeed her family have looked at that photograph and they don't know the person. We would like the person whose photograph that is to come forward. It's probable that the photograph was taken in a public house or maybe a hotel in the London area or the south of England. We'd like to eliminate that person from this investigation.
Right. And finally, at 7 o'clock on the morning of her death, the paperboy saw the light on and then later the light was off again, and we saw a brown Datsun waiting on the corner of Bruce Road, perhaps waiting for somebody to come out of the house. Do you think there's a link there?
Well, that's very significant because the owner of that car clearly has something important to say, because if the paperboy is right, it means that at that particular time there was somebody still in the house, and he may well have left at the same time as the person who owned that car, or indeed, of course, drove that car, was there. So we would, of course, like to hear from him.
Right, Mr. Gibbgray, thank you very much. There are a lot of points there. As always, the number to the studio here is 018118055 if you can help, or you can call the incident room at Mitcham direct, and that is 01541 2552. That's 01541 2552.
We'll bring you any developments as they arise tonight, and I should tell you that last month's Crimewatch has already led to a number of arrests, and it's thrown up several important leads which police are still pursuing. You may recall those dramatic pictures taken by remote cameras at Gartree Prison as a hijacked helicopter landed on the sports field and whisked away 2 prisoners. Well, one of our viewers helped confirm an existing line of inquiry, and John Kendall, one of the escapees, was subsequently recaptured. Another man is also in custody, awaiting trial on 26 offences, including abducting a man and hijacking a helicopter. But Sidney Draper is still at large. Please call us if you've seen him.
And we showed a robbery in progress at a Leeds Permanent Building Society office in East London. A man featured in a series of pictures taken by a security camera was seen leaving with over £2,000 in cash. Well, 4 calls in particular seemed promising, but then within an hour of the programme, a man walked into Barking Police Station and he has now been charged with the offence.
You may recall the post office raid in Salisbury. That was the gang who got away with £250,000 using specialised equipment to drill their way into the sorting office. Well, detectives had what they call a very good amount of information, including a call from someone who recognised that spanner with CAZ, or was it C-A-Z, written on it. We'll keep you informed of progress in that case.
The most disappointing result from last month was on the fire at Northampton. 3 people, including a 7-year-old girl, died in the fire. The police are still hoping to speak again to a man who called the studio to say he'd been in the neighbourhood at the time. The man was anxious not to be identified, and the police have asked us to assure him that his identity will be kept absolutely confidential. He might, without knowing it, hold the key to the murder of these 3 people. The number here to call again is 01811 8055. 2 other cases we featured have resulted in arrests, although not as a direct result of our programme. Near Honiton in Devon, a local youth has been charged with the murder of Ivy Batten. That was the 84-year-old lady who lived beside the railway line at Chute Bottom. And Andrew Longmire has been charged with a number of violent offences, including assault and possessing firearms.
John Bly turned up trumps again last month. Several people recognised their possessions on the screen. The Arthurley casket, a football trophy, was recognised by lots of people, including a friend of the owner from whose family the heirloom had been stolen. And 2 vases were recognised and traced to a major burglary in Langley in Berkshire, for which a man is now awaiting trial. And Flo Keane recognised the bracelet with the keys on it, which spelt out her name.
Well, now to Incident Desk, and this month, the clues that could help solve a double murder in Birmingham. The pensioners in London who were conned out of their pension books on the promise of some free food, and the lorry which could help identify the murderer wanted in Essex. Here are Constable Helen Phelps and Superintendent David Hatcher.
On the 22nd of December, the Tuesday evening just before Christmas, two elderly sisters were murdered in the Spark Hill area of Birmingham. Edna and Alice Rowley ran an old-fashioned corner shop on Greswold Road, Spark Hill. They'd worked there for over 50 years and lived in the house next door. This video was taken by scene-of-crime police officers the night the sisters were discovered, and it reveals a number of clues left by their killer. In the sitting room where Alice was found, the table was laid for an evening meal, but the food was untouched. In the kitchen, a full pot of tea was waiting to be carried in. In the front room was discarded wrapping paper. The sisters' Christmas presents must have been taken by the intruder. At the foot of the stairs was an empty crisp packet, also a label torn from a suitcase which we believe was taken. Upstairs in the bedroom where Edna was found, a pile of clothes may have been tipped out of that suitcase. In the shop, the stock was left untouched, but the old wooden till drawer had been pulled out and emptied. But the door to the shop was still locked and bolted, so the intruder most probably came in by another entrance.
The night the sisters died, a neighbour remembers seeing a man standing in the porch at the front door to their house around 7:30 p.m. He was in his late 40s with grey collar-length hair and wearing a well-worn green or brown jacket. Do you recognise him? These items are identical to the presents that were unwrapped and taken from the sisters' house. This radio cassette player is a Toshiba. There was a bottle of Tia Maria, and these toiletries were also taken. And that suitcase label came from one like this. Notice the lining. Someone must have seen it. And the last clue, the crisp packet left behind by the intruder. It wasn't a brand sold by the sisters. Perhaps someone sold them to this man. Ring us if you know him or can help in any way.
Next, we need your help to trace a lorry which could help solve the murder of an 18-year-old girl from Colchester in Essex. Fiona Gallant was last seen alive at about 6:30 p.m. on Thursday the 17th of December last year. Several people say they saw her giving directions to a lorry driver near her home in Lexton on the west side of Colchester. The next day, Fiona's body was found 2 miles further west, beside a lay-by on the London-bound carriageway of the A12 road. She had been asphyxiated. Despite far-reaching inquiries, that lorry has not been traced, and the driver has yet to come forward.
15 witnesses saw the lorry, and what they agreed on has helped us to create this drawing. It was certainly a flatbed vehicle and was probably not articulated. It had a single rear axle. There were 2 stacked loads on the rear, the taller at the back, and they were covered in a tarpaulin. Some witnesses described the lorry as light blue, others as dark blue, perhaps more like this. The wing mirrors may have been double, and it may have had indicators on stalks. A child who saw the lorry remembers the letters Tosh on the front of the cab, but they may have been scrubbed out or painted over by now. Several witnesses recall seeing a round emblem on the grille. That may have been any one of these badges, or of course it might have been a hubcap. We desperately want to trace that lorry's whereabouts, so if you've seen it or know where it is, call us now.
We're looking for a couple who made off with over 40 pension books in an extraordinary hoax in East London. This handout offering free food to pensioners was given away on the 3rd of February by a woman standing outside the Roman Road post office in the East End and near this Tesco's on Bethnal Green Road. The next day, 44 pensioners turned up at this church hall. Eggs, cheese, butter, orange squash, tea, sugar and bread rolls were laid out for them. A man at the hall collected their pension books, saying they had to be stamped, and he promptly disappeared. He's in his 40s, 5 foot 8 inches tall and heavily built, with ginger, greased-back hair. We don't know much about the woman who gave out the pamphlets. She's about 20, 5 foot 3 inches tall, with mousy, collar-length hair. If the pension books are cashed, the couple could get away with several £1,000s. And please remember, if you have a pension book, don't give it to anyone or let it out of your sight. And do please call us if you can help.
In the early hours of December the 29th, Barry St Germain was murdered at his home in Notting Hill. Barry was last seen alive on the bank holiday Monday after Christmas. He was at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in St Columba's Church, Chelsea. But no one has come forward yet who remembered whether he arrived with or left with anyone. Barry was a distinctive-looking man, aged 34, 6 foot 2 inches tall, with dyed blonde hair. That night he was wearing a black fedora hat and a long black trench coat. We particularly want to speak to anyone who saw Barry between St Columba's Church and his home in Pembridge Gardens, Notting Hill. He normally travelled by tube, but he could have stopped off somewhere. Barry is a homosexual, and we believe his killer was also gay. There were no signs of a break-in at his flat, so the killer may well have been someone Barry knew. So if you remember seeing Barry that Monday night, or can help in any way, do please ring us. Your call will be dealt with in complete confidence.
Lastly, take a look at these. They're what remains of an impressive collection that was stolen from a home in the village of Stock in Essex. The owner, Jim Strachan, kept them in this summer house. But sometime between the 6th and 8th of January it was broken into, and over 2,000 figures were taken.
One of the interesting things that you'll notice about these figures that were stolen is that quite a number of them stepped off with the right foot as against the left foot, which is the normal thing for them to do. Many of them have this identification painted on the base of them. They're all lead figures. Most of them are hollow cast. They were taken away in a cabin trunk. We would have needed 2 people, maybe 3, to have taken this because of the weight involved.
Well, whoever took them almost certainly knew what they were looking for because they selected the most valuable and unique examples. It's possible they're being offered for sale somewhere. So if you've seen them, call us now. There's a substantial reward.
And the number to ring is 01811 8055. 01811 8055.
Now think back, if you can, to a Monday morning 3 weeks before Christmas, 9 o'clock in the morning of Monday, December the 7th. In the university city of Oxford, Christmas shopping was getting underway, and 2 men, armed with a shotgun, were sitting in wait, about to terrorise the town centre. This was to be Oxford's first armed raid on a security van, and, as you're about to see, several people had a go to try and stop it. Indeed, the raid was foiled, but the gunmen got away. Thames Valley Police now need your help to try to trace them. Our reconstruction starts near Balliol College in Oxford's Broad Street.
This is Erica Barnes with the Radio Oxford News on Monday the 7th of December. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev will land at Brize Norton Airfield in Oxfordshire later this morning for an historic meeting with Mrs Thatcher.
At about 9 o'clock, this secretarial student, Amanda Mackenzie, arrived at her college in George Street. At the same time, a white Ford Escort van pulled in opposite the Co-op. A second man stayed sitting inside the van. The workman on the pavement was noticed by a woman who had to squeeze past him. She remembers he was short and had dark, greasy hair. At exactly 9 o'clock, a Securicorps van drew up outside the Co-op.
There's an armed robbery in progress.
A solicitor relayed news of the hold-up to the police.
Outside Three Ways House.
George Street.
George Street.
Keep back! Down! Down! Stop! I'll shoot! Stop! Stop!
They used an unusual Black Hawk hydraulic jack to try to get into the vault. Meanwhile, unseen by the robbers, this man, a local shopkeeper, Henry Dean, tried to prevent the raiders' getaway.
Get the door open! Down!
The men both wore trainers, and the gunman carried a pump-action shotgun.
Come on!
You got a gun, Pete?
Get out! Get out!
The police had little option but to obey the gunman. While the raider tried to lever open the door from the outside, inside, a Securicorps guard hammered the tools back out.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Shit!
Finally, they gave up.
Where's the case? In the van.
Come on, we'll use this! Come on!
The other man had found something to break the ignition lock.
Stay here!
This driver tried to block their way. And a guard threw an iron bar at the raiders. But the gunman seemed strangely cool. They drove up Gloucester Street and crossed Beaumont Street. Going up St John Street, the gunman tried to shut the back doors, but nearly fell out himself. They turned out of Pusey Street into St Giles and headed north up Banbury Road. Finally, they turned off the Woodstock Road into Russell Court. Where did they go after this? The van had been stolen a month previously from the Cowley area, but where had it been for that month? And police have been unable to trace where these items came from, these large canvas bags with the nautical logo on them, and the jack, which is normally used in car body repair shops or as fire rescue equipment. Robberies always look much easier in the movies, don't they? In fact, this was no laughing matter. A couple remarkably like these two tried a similar robbery in Swindon back in September, and there they fired shots all over the place. The man trying to find them is Detective Inspector David Belcher. They do seem a couple of bunglers, though, it must be said.
Mr. Ross, these two men are highly dangerous, discharging a shotgun in a busy city centre. We were extremely fortunate that nobody was injured.
You must have pretty good descriptions of them. Over 100 people saw them.
Yes, we'd also like some more people to come forward as well that saw the robbers before the robbery took place in George Street.
There were a couple of police officers, of course, among those who were there. What descriptions have you got of the man?
Well, the man with the yellow jacket holding the pump-action shotgun is described as 25 years old, 5'9" tall. He's slim-build. He has tidy brown short hair, blue eyes, and he's clean-shaven.
Very distinctive eyes, too, by the looks of that video.
Yes, indeed.
What about his accomplice?
Well, he's the man inside the Securicorps vehicle. He's described as about 5'6", 5'8", He's stockier than his accomplice, and he's much older, 25 to 30.
Now, their white van, in fact, the guy who tried to steal the keys from it has become something of a local celebrity, I gather. Where did the robbers get that white Ford Escort van from?
That was stolen from the Cowley area, Little Hay Road, on the 8th of November, a month before the robbery.
Right, and it's got two sets of plates there. The original ones, I gather, are the ones at the bottom, the false ones at the top.
That is correct.
Where did those false plates come from?
They were made at Partco in Windmill Road in Croydon, south-east London. And we don't know when, of course. It was sometime after, perhaps after the vehicle was stolen.
So it is quite conceivable this wasn't a local job at all. These people could have come from anywhere.
Indeed, they could. The motorways connect, obviously, Oxford to London. They could easily have come from the London area.
Now, this Black Hawk Porter Power jack, and it operates by, if you pump that handle, then these jaws are supposed to prise open, and it leaks, this particular one, which is quite distinctive. Where did this one come from, do you know?
Well, that is the question which we'd very much like to answer tonight. It's new condition. It's probably been stolen from a garage or from a vehicle, or indeed it may even been purchased by the gunmen themselves.
Right. Very dangerous people, as you say. There's a reward, I gather.
Yes, quite a substantial reward offered by Securical.
Well, it may well be someone in the underworld is prepared to shop these particular rather reckless people. If you can help, here's the number, 01811 8055. 01811 8055. If you saw the robbery or know anything, there's the Oxford number. Call the incident room direct, 0865, the code for Oxford, 249 881. That's 0865 249 881.
Well, since we've been on the air, we've had quite a lot of calls on the cases we've covered already. We've had one possible lead on the murder of Linda Hunter, and it's a clue on the missing wheel and tyre from her car. A garage owner has called in to say that somebody tried to sell him a tyre just like the one described, so we're going to be following that one up. And on the murder of Cathy Walsh, we've had a lot of calls from people during the evening, from people who saw her on the night that she died. And police are busy evaluating those. And they would particularly like to hear from somebody who phoned in some distress. Please do call again. It is in confidence. It's 01811 8055. One of the most shocking crimes we've ever covered on Crimewatch has finally been resolved. It was a raid on a gun shop in Leicestershire in which the owner was doused in petrol and set alight. Well, as a result of information from Crimewatch viewers, the men responsible have now been convicted for the crime. At Leicester Crown Court, 2 men were given 14 and 12 years respectively for attempted murder and robbery. Another one was sentenced to 9 years youth custody, and a fourth was given 3 years for conspiracy.
You may remember a reconstruction just over a year ago in which one of a gang robbing a security van dressed as a school's crossing assistant, complete with white Mac and lollipop sign. Well, that raid was in Hyde, near Manchester, and watching the reconstruction in another suburb of the city was a woman who was just about to head out for the evening when she thought she saw something familiar. "That's my lollipop," she said. It had gone missing from outside a pub in Woodley, and her information in fact helped police with a new line of inquiry that they were already following. 4 men and a woman have now been charged with conspiracy to commit a series of armed robberies involving over £250,000.
And at around the same time as that case, we reconstructed a case in Northampton in which elderly people were attacked in their homes. A viewer called the programme with information which now, over a year later, has led to the arrest of 1 man. Police are looking for some others and we'll let you know what happens.
There's been a crucial development on a case we reconstructed 2 years ago. Barry Lewis vanished while playing near his home in Walworth in South London. The next day, a driver gave a lift to a man who was carrying a small boy, and who said that his own car had run out of petrol. The driver dropped the man and boy beside a red car. It was probably a Talbot Horizon. Well, the police checked 9,500 red Horizons, but it got them nowhere. Then 10 weeks ago, an anonymous caller told police to look in a garage under some flats at Witchwood House in the Canterbury Gardens estate in Brixton in South London, and they found a red Talbot Horizon. Detectives on the case have asked us to appeal to that caller. Please ring again. The police guarantee it will be in confidence. Whoever made that call, though, presumably knows more. And let's face it, other children's lives might be at stake. The number 01811 8055.
Finally tonight, the Crimewatch photo call. 4 faces of people police would like to speak to and whom you might recognise. Here again are David Hatcher and Helen Phelps.
Can you help us identify this man seen here last May in the Nationwide Building Society in Forest Gate, East London? He threatened staff with a handgun, carried in a white plastic bag, but as there wasn't any money in the cash drawers, he left empty-handed. Here he is a month earlier, just 1 mile away in the Woolwich Building Society, Upton Park, London. Again he carried a handgun, and this time he got away with several £100s after threatening another customer. On both occasions he handed over these notes demanding money. Take a closer look at those pictures. Sooner or later he may act on those notes, so we need to catch him now. If you recognise him, ring us.
This is a British visitor's passport photocopied in November by a bank in Paris. The passport is now known to be forged, and the man in the picture is part of an international gang using stolen cheques to transfer money from London to Europe. This may be a better likeness of him. Don't know any more about his description except that he's aged about 30 and perhaps the glasses are a disguise. He used the name William J. Kelly and gave a false address on the Harrow Road, North London. The bank in Paris was defrauded of nearly £500,000 French francs. Call us if you can identify him.
Next, do you recognise this woman? On the 25th of November last year, she rushed past the cash desks at a home-based store in Catford, South London. The trolley was stacked with what we believe were hundreds of pounds worth of electrical goods. She loaded them into a red Renault 16, registration number TPF 554W. It may have been driven away by an accomplice. Look at her again. She's 25, 5'10", slim, with mousy brown hair. If you've seen her or that car, call us now.
Finally, an armed robber who raided 4 London building societies just before Christmas. Here he is in the Leeds Permanent Building Society in Richmond, Surrey on November the 18th. He threatened staff with a handgun and made off with several £1,000s. We believe he may have made his getaway on the tube. Perhaps you saw him. Take a good look at him. He's 6 feet tall and aged about 30. He was wearing a dark jacket, blue jeans and trainers. Give us a call if you recognise him or if you think you've seen any of the 4 faces on our photo call tonight.
There's the number 01811 8055. That's 01811 8055. We're just getting some information in calls so far. 15 possible witnesses apparently to the lorry in the Fiona Gallant murder who think that they can identify it. And callers may have found at least part of the collection of toy soldiers that was stolen in Essex. Apparently some of them have turned up in North London in pawn shops. Obviously we'll have more information in Crimewatch Update.
If you've been finding it difficult to get through, do keep trying if the lines are busy. You'll find a list of local police numbers on CFAX on page 186, or of course you can always write to us, and our address is Crimewatch UK, BBC Television, London, W12 8QT.
We will be back in an hour and a half, as I say, with Crimewatch Update, and we'll have more news still on Open Air tomorrow. But if you're heading off for bed soon, you might bear in mind that the latest crime figures actually show a net overall decrease in crime in the London area. And there are other indications that several crimes, and especially burglary, may be declining throughout the country. And it seems that the calls from viewers behind me are helping to accelerate that process, so don't have nightmares, do sleep well. Good night.
Good night.
Welcome back. We've had a busy evening since we came off the air, an hour and a half ago. A large number of developments. In one case, a man whom police were very anxious to trace in connection with a murder inquiry has been identified and has volunteered himself at a police station. Sue.
Well, it's on that first case this evening, the murder last October of 60-year-old Cathy Walsh. She'd lived in Heaton Road in Tooting in South London for 30 years. She was very well known in the area, and nobody so far has been able to shed any light on why it was she was murdered. On the night she died, two women are quite sure it was Cathy sitting opposite them on a bus. She seemed flustered and upset.
Would you give this to the bus driver? It's my address. All right.
She got off the bus, and that was the last time she was seen alive. Detective Superintendent Brendan Gibb-Gray and his colleagues have been taking calls all evening. Now, the big news, of course, is that you now know who the man in the mystery photo is.
Yes, indeed we do. We've had a couple of calls from people giving a name and identity, and in fact in the last half an hour the man himself has walked into a police station in North London and identified himself. So we're very relieved that we've got that information tonight.
Right, you can tie up that inquiry. The young man that she was heard arranging to meet on the night that she actually died, is there anything on that?
We've got one or two useful leads on that, but we still need more help. More help from the public, please.
It's puzzled people why you haven't been able to find out exactly who the bus driver was at the number 44 bus on that night. It should be quite straightforward.
Yes, indeed. We have seen all the drivers of the buses on that particular evening on the number 44. None of the drivers say that they actually took a piece of paper with anyone's name and address on it. So we want confirmation or otherwise that Mrs. Walsh was on that bus, and indeed her name and address was given to one of the drivers.
Right, and if you were that bus driver, do ring. It'll be in complete confidence and nobody will find out and you won't get into trouble from the London Transport. Is that right?
Absolutely.
At the Datsun, anybody recognise that?
We've had one or two useful leads on that, and which we are now following up. So
Right.
I'm very hopeful on that as well.
And a final appeal tonight.
Yes, we've had a call from a young man who says that he followed Cathy when she got off the bus. I appeal to that young man to phone again. He's already phoned twice, and I would say to him, phone me in confidence.
Mr. Gibb-Gray, thank you.
Now to that dramatic and bungled robbery in Oxford city centre. At 9 o'clock on a Monday morning 3 weeks before Christmas, two men armed with a shotgun held up a Securicor van, a bus and a police car. Now, the man in charge of the case is Inspector David Belcher. I gather you've been overwhelmed with calls, frankly.
Indeed, both here and in the incident room at Oxford.
Now, at Oxford, a lot of people haven't been able to get through. And I know you put a lot of men on tonight, men and women, but
that's right.
You still haven't been able to answer all the calls there.
No, and we urge everybody that cannot get through tonight to telephone tomorrow on the Oxford telephone number. The telephones will be manned throughout the day tomorrow.
Right. Now, a lot of people reckon that they knew about this jack, even though it's a very rare and unusual device that was used to try and prise open the Securicor safe. What do people want to know about that?
They would like to know a little bit more detail about it, and we've already shown it on the earlier programme. All we can say it's a 10-ton hydraulic porter-power Black Hawk jack. It has a wedgy end, it's a specialised end to it, and on this particular jack it was leaking.
Right, we need to know where it came from. And I gather you've a lot of people who put names to the possible gunman and his accomplice.
Yes, we have now up to 50 names that have been given us, and we will eventually get round to seeing every one of those names.
That gunman had very distinctive blue staring eyes, according to almost all the witnesses. There were over 100 witnesses, of course, including some police officers.
That's right, indeed there were. And of course on the bag as well. We've had plenty of calls on the bags.
Those big canvas bags.
The big canvas bags, and we urge again people to come forward with those further names of places where these outlets are like to be.
OK, Mr. Belcher, thank you. Sue.
Well, now to all the calls we've had on incident desk and photo call. First, David Hatcher, and that tragic case of the elderly sisters who were murdered just before Christmas.
Yes, we've had a number of leads to follow up there. First of all, in respect to that Toshiba cassette player that we mentioned, we've had a possible lead on where that might be for sale. The suitcase we mentioned, well, a shopkeeper said they'd had a visitor, or two girls call in the shop and showed a suitcase like the one we're looking for and said they bought it from a shelter shop. So that's another lead to follow up, and we'd like those two girls, if they're watching, to contact us because we must trace that suitcase and its origin. Another caller said he recognised the photo fit that we showed, but let's re-emphasise there is a reward in this case. It's two elderly ladies that have been tragically murdered, and that must be cleared up.
Right, so investigations might look quite a lot further on by the end of tonight, by the sound of it.
We certainly hope so.
What about the couple who stole 40 pension books in Bethnal Green in East London?
It's absolutely despicable crime, but it was also somewhat saucy. Well, 2 days ago, a woman was arrested in Walthamstow, and in possession of a number of pension books, and it may well be that that links with our case, so we might be on the way to getting both offenders in that one.
Right. And we had some news earlier, I think, about the collection of soldiers.
Yes, we've had numerous calls about sightings of these soldiers in shops in the London and Essex area, so that too may lead us to the offenders, because it's quite likely that those 2,000 figures were split up and sold in very small lots. So anybody who knows where there are soldiers for sale that fit our description, please still call us.
Right. On photocall, we wanted somebody who defrauded a Paris bank of nearly £500,000 francs.
Yes, can't say too much on that one, but a man's arranged to meet us tomorrow with a number of names, he says. Enormous amount of money involved in that series of frauds. And then lastly, that Richmond robber from Surrey. We had 32 calls on this one. In fact, 5 people called and gave exactly the same name, and a couple more people called and gave us exactly the same location for this person. So we're hopeful that he too will be talking to us very soon.
Right. Finally, the tip-off on the murder of Barry Lewis, the little 6-year-old boy who was murdered 2 years ago. The car turned up, the Talbot Horizon turned up in a garage in Brixton, but the people who tipped us off haven't phoned back.
Yes, that was a woman who called and actually gave us the lead to where the car would be, some 10 weeks ago now. If you are watching, please do call us again. We're sure you can help us further. Other children, I think, are still at risk. Please call us now, or at least get in touch tomorrow.
David, thank you.
Fiona Gallant was an 18-year-old who was murdered a week before Christmas near Colchester. What news have we had on that?
An enormous response. There's been suggestions as to the make of the vehicle, because a lorry was involved.
This was a blue flatbed truck.
That's right. There were many sightings of that vehicle, and there have also been a suggestion as to the companies that are using the name Tosh. Tosh was seen on the front of that lorry. But we particularly want to appeal to a caller who rang, seemed to know a lot about the case, started to talk about it, but then rang off. Please, call back.
OK. Now, the murder of Barry St Germain in Notting Hill Gate in West London. He was a very distinctive character, 6'2", must have been known by a lot of people, dyed blonde hair, quite a character. And there are thought to be homosexual overtones in the murder.
Yes, that's right. There were a few calls on this, one particularly very interesting. A lady with a strong Irish accent called. She said that she was a member of the Alcoholics Anonymous, a group that Barry frequented very often, and that she knew Barry, and that she saw him on the bank holiday Monday of Christmas 1987, at the Swan Public House. That was at the top of Kensington Church Street and Bayswater Road.
That's
and
very
we can
close
see
to
it
where he
flashing
lives.
there. That's right. We would like that lady to call back. She might have more vital information.
What about that gunman operating in East London, going into building societies in Upton Park, Forest Gate?
Yes, that's right. A black man described as 5'6" to 5'8", stocky build. What you can't see, apart from the baseball cap, was that he was wearing open-toe sandals. Well, we had about 22 calls on this, and a few of them are interesting and will be followed up as soon as possible.
And have you found the shoplifter, that audacious shoplifter who just walked out with hundreds of pounds worth of goods from a Sainsbury's store?
No, we haven't. It's a bit of a shame because there's a very good picture of her, and she's quite a distinctive person. Her
Very
height,
tall, isn't she?
Yes, 5'10" to 6 foot. She's slim with long, mousy brown hair, wearing a brown coat there. She got into a red Renault, and the registration number of that is TPF 554W. Not only do we not know who she is, but we haven't had any sightings of that car.
OK, thank you.
Well, if you still have any information, the lines are going to be closing down in just a few minutes now, but we'll give you the local relevant police numbers you can ring in just a few moments. And you can write to us, of course. It's Crimewatch UK, BBC Television, London W12 HQT. We hope to have some more progress to report tomorrow morning, and we'll have details on open air at about 11:25.
And as you can see, more calls are still coming in. We'll be back in 4 weeks' time, Sue's pregnancy permitting. That's on Thursday, March the 17th. Until then, well, don't wait for Crimewatch. Do call the police if you think you have any information about any sort of crime. And above all else, don't have nightmares. Do sleep well. Good night.
Good night.